She just wanted to fill her tank and go home. But in the dead of night, at a lonely gas station, she found herself trapped in a terrifying situation. When no one stepped in to help, danger seemed inevitable. But then, someone unexpected changed everything. What happened next will leave you speechless. Watch till the end to see how this unforgettable night took a shocking turn. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more jaw-dropping stories. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? The dark highway stretched endlessly into the night, its only illumination coming from the occasional streetlight flickering above the worn asphalt. The neon sign of a lonely gas station buzzed in the distance, its light casting an eerie glow over the empty lot. A black SUV rolled into the station, its tires crunching against the pavement as it pulled up to one of the pumps. Behind the wheel sat Mark Wahlberg, the renowned actor and producer, fresh off a long day on set. His muscles ached from the hours of filming, and all he wanted was to refuel and get home. Mark stepped out of his SUV, adjusting his baseball cap as he walked toward the pump. The night was quiet except for the low hum of distant traffic. But his moment of solitude was interrupted by raucous laughter. He turned his head slightly and spotted them. 4 bikers lounging near their motorcycles, dressed in leather jackets, their voices loud and brash. Their bikes were parked haphazardly, blocking part of the fueling area as if they owned the place. Mark cast them a brief glance before minding his own business. He wasn't looking for trouble. He inserted his card into the gas pump and selected his fuel grade, keeping his attention on the task at hand. However, something shifted in the atmosphere, something that made him instinctively more alert. A silver sedan pulled into the station, the headlights reflecting off the gas pumps. The laughter of the bikers quieted just slightly as they turned their attention toward the car. The driver's side door opened and a young black woman stepped out. Her posture was confident, but there was a hesitation in her movements, a subtle stiffness in her shoulders as if she sensed the eyes on her. She walked to the pump next to Mark's, inserting her card and beginning the process of refueling. She avoided looking at the bikers. One of the men, a tall, scruffy-bearded biker, nudged his friend with his elbow and let out a low chuckle. "Look what we got here," he said loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. "Little birdie just flew in." His friend, a stocky man with a shaved head, smirked and leaned against his bike. "Driving a car like that? You sure you know how to pump gas, sweetheart?" The woman kept her focus on her car, her hands steady despite the tension in the air. She unscrewed the gas cap and inserted the nozzle, pretending not to hear them. The bearded biker took a few casual steps closer, the heels of his boots clanking against the pavement. "Hey, girl," he called, louder this time. "Did you steal that car, or did you earn it another way?" The group erupted into cruel laughter. Mark exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening as he glanced in their direction. His instincts told him this was going to escalate. The woman, still refusing to engage, finished attaching the nozzle and started fueling her car. Her silence only emboldened the bikers. "What's the matter?" the bearded man pressed, stepping even closer. "Too good to talk to us? Come on, give us a little smile. Maybe we'll help you out." Another biker, this one tall and lanky, grinned. "Poor thing looks scared," he said, his voice filled with false sympathy. "Don't worry, darling, we're friendly. We'll even show you some tricks with the hose." Mark clenched his fists. He knew that tone, that kind of predatory mockery. He also knew what happened when men like them thought no one would challenge them. The woman finished fueling and quickly moved toward her car, her keys already in her hand. But before she could open the door, one of the bikers stepped in front of it, blocking her way. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, folding his arms over his chest. The woman's breath hitched, but she stood her ground. "Please, move," she said, her voice firm but slightly wavering. "I don't want any trouble." The leader of the group, the bearded biker, stepped even closer, towering over her. "Trouble?" he repeated with a mocking smirk. "Oh no, sweetie. We're just having some fun. You wouldn't want to spoil the party, would you?" One of the men reached for her arm, his grip rough. "Come on, baby," he sneered. "Let's take a little ride. It'll be fun for all of us." The woman yanked her arm away, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Panic flashed across her face. Without thinking, she grabbed the gas pump nozzle and sprayed gasoline directly into the biker's face. He screamed, stumbling backward, his hands clawing at his burning eyes. "You little—" he roared, his voice filled with fury. The leader of the group snarled and pulled a lighter from his pocket, his fingers flicking it open with a metallic click. "Hold her," he ordered, his face contorted with anger. Two of the bikers grabbed her arms, restraining her. She struggled, her chest heaving with fear. The leader stepped closer, grinning wickedly as he held up the lighter. "Time for a little fire show," he said, his thumb hovering over the flame. The woman's eyes widened in terror. And then, a calm, commanding voice cut through to the night. "Let her go." The bikers froze. Slowly, they turned to see Mark Wahlberg stepping forward, his massive frame illuminated by the station's dim lights. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. The leader of the bikers scowled, his grip tightening on the lighter. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "Stay out of this, tough guy, unless you want to get burned." Mark removed his baseball cap, placing it on the hood of his SUV. "I'm just a guy who doesn't like seeing cowards gang up on someone," he said, his voice steady and firm. His gaze locked onto the leader's eyes, unflinching. "Now let her go," he continued, his voice lowering, "before you regret it." The bikers laughed, but there was a flicker of hesitation in their eyes. One of them sneered. "You think you're some kind of hero? This ain't a movie, pal." Mark took another step forward, his calm demeanor unwavering. "No," he said simply, "but I'm still going to make sure you regret messing with her." The tension in the air was suffocating. The bikers sized him up, their sneers masking their uncertainty. The stage was set for a confrontation, and Mark Wahlberg was more than ready. The laughter of the bikers grew louder as they turned their attention back to the woman, dismissing Mark Wahlberg as nothing more than an annoyance. The leader of the group smirked, waving his lighter threateningly, while the biker, who had been sprayed with gasoline, wiped his face furiously, his eyes still burning. One of the bikers leaned down, inspecting the gasoline dripping off his jacket before narrowing his eyes at the woman. "You really shouldn't have done that, sweetheart," he said venomously. "Now you made us mad." He stomped his boot against the side of her car, leaving a deep dent in the door, and laughed cruelly as she flinched. Another biker ran a knife along the paint, the sharp screech of metal against metal cutting through the night. "Oops," he mocked, grinning. "Guess your fancy car ain't so fancy anymore." The woman stood frozen, her breath quick and shallow, trapped between her rising fear and her instinct to fight back. The leader grabbed her chin roughly, forcing her to look him in the eyes. "I told you to smile," he growled, his fingers digging into her skin. "Or do you need some help with that?" He leaned in closer, his foul breath making her stomach churn. "You're not going anywhere until we're done having our fun." One of the bikers laughed and emptied a bit of gasoline near her feet, his grin widening. "How about we warm things up for you a bit, huh? Maybe a little fire will make you more cooperative." The leader flicked the lighter open, the small flame dancing ominously in the darkness. "Let's see how brave you really are." The sound of Mark Wahlberg clearing his throat snapped the group's attention back to him. He had stepped closer, his stance relaxed but radiating quiet authority. His expression remained calm, but there was a sharp edge in his voice. "You've got about 3 seconds to back off," he said, his voice steady, "or I'm going to show you what happens to cowards who think they can bully someone." The leader snorted and turned to face Mark fully, flicking the lighter closed and slipping it back into his pocket. "Oh, tough guy wants to play hero, huh? You think you're going to stop us?" He gestured around. "This isn't some Hollywood set, pal. No stunt doubles, no cameras, no director yelling cut when things get rough." Mark didn't flinch. He crossed his arms over his chest, tilting his head slightly. "No cameras," he repeated. "That just means no one's going to call action when I start teaching you a lesson." The insult landed, and for a moment, the leader's grin faltered. His fingers twitched at his side as he weighed his options. One of the bikers, a younger man with a tattoo running down his neck, cracked his knuckles and stepped forward. "You got a big mouth for someone about to get his ass kicked," he sneered. "Boys, let's teach this clown a lesson." Before anyone could react, the tattooed biker lunged at Mark, throwing a wild punch. Mark sidestepped effortlessly, letting the man's momentum carry him forward before driving his elbow into the biker's ribs. A sharp grunting of pain burst from the man's lips as he stumbled back, gasping for breath. Mark took a step forward, rolling his shoulders. "That's it," he said, his voice laced with mock disappointment. "I expected more from someone who acts so tough." Another biker, the one who had sprayed gasoline, growled and swung a chain in a wide arc, aiming for Mark's head. Mark's reflexes kicked in instantly. He caught the chain mid-swing, yanking it out of the man's grip before slamming his forearm into the biker's chest. The force sent him sprawling backward onto the ground, wheezing as he clutched his sternum. The leader's smirk twisted into a snarl. "You think you're funny, huh?" He pulled a switchblade from his pocket and flipped it open, the blade gleaming under the dim gas station lights. "Let's see how funny you are with this." He rushed at Mark, knife in hand, aiming straight for his torso. Mark caught the man's wrist with lightning speed, twisting it at an unnatural angle until the knife clattered to the ground. "A knife?" Mark said, shaking his head in disappointment. "That's the best you could come up with?" He twisted the leader's arm further before shoving him backward into the gas pump, making him crash against it with a loud thud. The last remaining biker, seeing his friends sprawled out on the ground groaning in pain, decided he wanted no part of the fight. He turned on his heel and ran. Mark moved fast. He grabbed the back of the man's jacket and yanked him off his feet, throwing him down onto the asphalt. The biker hit the ground hard, a stunned look on his face. "Where do you think you're going?" Mark asked, standing over him. "You were so brave a minute ago." By the time it was over, all 4 bikers were either unconscious or too hurt to move. Mark Wahlberg stood tall, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over them. He looked down at the leader, who was clutching his arm and glaring up at him with pure hatred. "You're nothing but a pack of cowards," Mark said coldly. "You don't scare anyone. You don't even respect yourselves, do you? If you did, you wouldn't be acting like this." He turned to the woman, who was standing by her car, still shaken but unharmed. His expression softened slightly. "Are you okay?" She nodded, her voice trembling as she answered. "Yes, thank you." The sound of approaching sirens broke the tense silence. Someone must have called the police. The flashing lights of the patrol cars could be seen in the distance, getting closer with every second. Mark glanced back at the bikers, who were too injured and humiliated to move. "Looks like the show's over," he said. "Time for you guys to face the consequences." As the police cars pulled into the station, Mark Wahlberg took a step back, letting the officers handle the rest. The bikers' reign of terror had come to an abrupt and humiliating end. The flashing red and blue lights filled the gas station as police cars screeched to a halt. Officers spilled out, their hands hovering over their holstered weapons as they assessed the chaotic scene. The four bikers lay sprawled across the pavement, groaning in pain, some clutching their ribs, others barely able to move. The leader of the group sat slumped against a gas pump, his arm still twisted awkwardly from Mark Wahlberg's earlier takedown. His eyes burned with humiliation and rage, but he knew better than to try and fight back now. The woman stood frozen near her car, her breath uneven, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. One of the officers, a tall man with graying hair and a sharp, observant gaze, stepped forward. His name tag read Sergeant Reynolds. His eyes swept over the scene before locking onto Mark, instantly recognizing the Hollywood star standing over the defeated gang of bikers. "Mr. Wahlberg," Reynolds said, raising an eyebrow, "care to explain what happened in here?" Mark exhaled, rolling his shoulders back as he met the officer's gaze. "These guys thought they could harass an innocent woman," he said simply. "Tried to rough her up, threatened her, wouldn't let her leave. They got what they deserved." The officer's gaze shifted to the woman. "Ma'am, is that true?" She nodded quickly, her voice trembling but firm. "Yes, they wouldn't let me leave. One of them grabbed me. Another threatened to set me on fire after I defended myself. If he hadn't stepped in..." She swallowed hard, the weight of what could have happened finally crashing over her. Sergeant Reynolds narrowed his eyes at the bikers. "That true?" The leader of the gang sneered, his bruised face twisted in defiance. "She attacked us first," he spat. "Drenched my guy in gas. What were we supposed to do? Just let her go?" Mark took a step forward, his presence alone making the man flinch. "Yeah," Mark said flatly, "that's exactly what you were supposed to do." Reynolds sighed, shaking his head as he turned to his fellow officers. "Cuff them," he ordered. "All of them." The bikers protested, their voices rising in angry shouts as officers moved in, pulling them up from the ground and securing their wrists with handcuffs. "This is bullshit, man," one of them barked. "He attacked us." One of the younger officers smirked. "Funny, doesn't look that way." He gestured toward the bystanders who had gathered around, their phones out, recording everything. "I think the evidence says otherwise." The leader's face darkened as he glanced at the crowd. Dozens of people stood near the gas station, some whispering, others watching in silent awe as Mark Wahlberg stood tall, calm, completely in control of the situation. Several were still recording, ensuring the world would see exactly how this played out. "You idiots don't even realize how deep you're in," Reynolds muttered, shaking his head at the bikers. He turned back to Mark. "And you, Mr. Wahlberg, did you hurt them?" Mark smirked slightly. "Not any more than they deserved." Reynolds chuckled under his breath, looking at the bikers once more. "Figures," he sighed. "All right, boys, let's get them out of here. Charges will include harassment, assault, attempted arson, and I'm sure we'll find a few more." As the officers loaded the bikers into the back of the patrol cars, the leader locked eyes with Mark one last time. "You think you won?" he growled. You think this makes you some kind of hero?" Mark tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "No," he said, "but it makes you a loser." The leader lunged forward, only to be yanked back by the officer restraining him. "You son of a—" The door slammed shut, cutting off his words as the police car pulled away. The moment the bikers were gone, the tension in the air eased. The crowd slowly began to dissipate, murmuring in awe about what they had just witnessed. Mark turned back to the woman, his expression softer now. "Are you sure you're all right?" She let out a shaky breath. "I think so." A moment passed before she looked at him with gratitude in her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." Mark shook his head. "You don't have to." One of the officers approached him, his face more relaxed now that the situation was under control. "I have to say, Mr. Wahlberg, that was impressive. You ever think about joining law enforcement?" Mark chuckled. "Nah, I think I'm good where I am." Reynolds nodded. "Still, we appreciate what you did here. A lot of people would have just looked the other way." Mark's expression hardened slightly. "That's the problem, isn't it?" The officer studied him for a moment before nodding in agreement. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it is." The woman turned toward her car, running a hand over the fresh dents in the door, the deep scratches along the paint. "Damn," she muttered. Mark followed her gaze. "Insurance will cover it," he said. "If not, I know a guy." She looked at him, a small smile finally breaking through. "A guy who fixes cars, or a guy who deals with guys like them?" Mark smirked. "Both." She laughed lightly, the sound still carrying a hint of exhaustion but also relief. Mark glanced toward the last remaining officers finishing up at the scene. The night felt quieter now, calmer. It was over. He pulled his baseball cap from the hood of his car and placed it back on his head. "Take care of yourself," he told her. She met his gaze, her smile small but real. "You too, Mark." He nodded before stepping back toward his SUV. As he climbed inside and started the engine, the low rumble filled the otherwise silent station. He threw one last glance in the rearview mirror, watching as the woman leaned against her car, still processing everything that had just happened. Then, without another word, he pulled out of the lot, the headlights of his SUV disappearing into the night. The gas station grew quieter as the last police car pulled away, leaving only the distant hum of traffic on the highway. The air was still thick with tension, but for the first time in the last half hour, there was no immediate danger. Mark Wahlberg sat behind the wheel of his SUV, his fingers drumming lightly on the steering wheel as he stared at the empty lot through his windshield. He had done what needed to be done, but his mind lingered on the confrontation. He had seen too many situations like this before, too many times where no one stepped in. Tonight, at least, things had ended the right way. He glanced once more at the woman standing by her car. She was running her fingers over the dents in her door, her brows knitted together in frustration. Even though the threat was gone, the damage remained, a reminder of what had happened. Mark sighed and reached for the door handle, pushing it open and stepping out once more. He took a few steps toward her, his boots scraping softly against the pavement. "Hey," he called out, "let me help you with that." She turned to him, startled, then shook her head with a tired smile. "Unless you've got a magic wand, I think I'm stuck with this for a while." Mark smirked. "No magic wand, but I know a good body shop. And I'm guessing you've had enough of bad luck for one night." She exhaled, shaking her head. "You could say that." She looked at him more closely now, the shock from earlier beginning to fade. "I still don't get it," she admitted. "Why did you step in? Most people would have just kept their heads down, filled their tanks, and driven off." Mark crossed his arms, leaning against the side of his SUV. "Because that's exactly what those guys were counting on. They weren't worried about getting caught. They thought no one would stop them." His gaze darkened slightly. "I wasn't about to let them be right." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Well, I'm glad you didn't." A faint smile crossed his lips. "What's your name?" "Ava," she said. "Nice to meet you, Ava. Wish it was under better circumstances." She let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, me too." She glanced down at her car, her fingers trailing over one of the scratches. "Guess I should be grateful it's just my car that took a hit." Mark's expression hardened slightly. "Could have been worse. You handled yourself well." She looked at him skeptically. "I panicked and sprayed a guy with gasoline." He smirked. "Which gave you enough time to fight back. That's not nothing." She exhaled slowly, shaking her head. "I still don't know how I got here. I was just trying to get gas. Next thing I know, I've got a bunch of bikers circling me like vultures." Mark's jaw tightened. He had seen it too many times before. People who thought that they could take whatever they wanted just because no one was around to stop them. Tonight had been a close call, but it made him wonder how many times things didn't end this way. Ava wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of the late-night chill in the air. "You ever been in a situation like this before?" she asked. Mark exhaled, leaning against the car. "Not exactly like this, but I've seen people like them before. Guys who think power is about making people afraid of them. They don't expect anyone to push back." He met her gaze. "Until they do." She let his words settle in before nodding. "Well, I hope they think twice before pulling this crap again." Mark glanced toward the road where the taillights of the last police car had disappeared into the night. "They won't. Not for a long time." Ava sighed, rubbing her hands over her arms. "I should probably head home." Mark nodded. "Need me to follow you?" She hesitated for half a second, then shook her head. "No, I'll be okay." He studied her for a moment before nodding. "All right." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, handing it to her. "That's the body shop I was talking about. Tell them I sent you. They'll take care of it." She looked at the card, then back at him. "Thanks, Mark." "Take care of yourself, Ava." She nodded, a genuine smile forming on her face. "You too." Mark watched as she climbed into her car, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. Only after her taillights disappeared onto the highway did he turn back to his own car, exhaling slowly. He climbed into the driver's seat, pulled his cap lower over his eyes, and started the engine. As he pulled onto the road, he let the night swallow the gas station behind him. Another story, another fight. He wasn't looking for trouble, but if it found him again, he knew exactly what he would do. Mark Wahlberg drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel as the highway stretched out before him. The adrenaline from the confrontation at the gas station had long since faded, leaving behind a lingering unease. He had done the right thing. He knew that. But there was something about the whole encounter that gnawed at him. He had seen too many situations like that before. Too many people who thought they could do whatever they wanted because they believed no one would stand up to them. Tonight, they had learned a lesson. But Mark couldn't shake the thought of how easily things could have gone another way. He glanced at the digital clock on the dashboard. It was past midnight now. The roads were mostly empty, only the occasional pair of headlights appearing in his rearview mirror before fading into the darkness behind him. The weight of the day settled on his shoulders, exhaustion creeping in. He just wanted to get home, maybe pour himself a drink and put the whole night behind him. Then he noticed something. A pair of headlights in the distance. At first it was nothing unusual, just another car on the road. But something about the way it moved made his instincts kick in. The vehicle wasn't maintaining a steady distance. It was getting closer. Not in the natural way of a car overtaking another on an open highway, but in a way that felt deliberate, calculated. Mark tightened his grip on the wheel, his mind immediately sharpening with awareness. He glanced into the side mirror. The car behind him was dark. Black, or maybe a deep blue, its headlights casting an eerie glow across the pavement. It was closing the distance at an unsettling pace. He kept his expression neutral, his heartbeat steady, but his body was already preparing for whatever was coming. He had been in enough dangerous situations to know that when something didn't feel right, it usually wasn't. He eased his foot off the accelerator slightly, testing the waters. If the driver was just another late-night commuter, they'd pass him. But they didn't. The car matched his speed, staying right behind him. Mark exhaled slowly. This wasn't a coincidence. His mind worked quickly, running through the possibilities. Could be road rage. Could be some idiot trying to mess with him. But something about it felt more personal. He thought back to the gas station, the bikers. The police had taken them away, but that didn't mean they were alone. Guys like that always had more people, friends, associates, and if those guys had been looking for trouble tonight, chances were they weren't the only ones. Mark didn't believe in paranoia. He believed in instincts. And right now, his instincts were screaming at him. The car behind him suddenly sped up, closing the distance between them. Mark clenched his jaw. All right, game on. He didn't panic. Panic got people killed. Instead, he kept his hands steady and waited. He wasn't about to let them dictate how this was going to go. If they wanted to play, they'd have to show their hand first. The car behind him swerved slightly, moving closer to his bumper. Not enough to hit him, not yet. Just enough to send a message. Mark smirked to himself. Wrong guy to mess with. He flicked his blinker on and veered toward an upcoming exit, watching in his mirror. The car followed. No hesitation, no second guessing. They weren't just another driver. They were tailing him. His smirk faded. Now he knew for sure. The off-ramp led to a quieter road, a stretch of pavement surrounded by nothing but trees and open fields. No traffic, no streetlights. If they were looking for a confrontation, this was the place to do it. Fine. Mark wasn't afraid of confrontations. He let the car behind him get closer, almost inviting them in. He wanted to see what their next move was. If they were dumb enough to try something, they were going to regret it. The moment the other car moved to the side, trying to pull up alongside him, Mark made his move. With lightning-fast reflexes, he slammed his foot down on the brakes. The sudden change in speed caught the other driver off guard. Their car shot forward uncontrollably, and in that split second of disorientation, Mark yanked the wheel and veered onto a side road, cutting them off. The pursuing car skidded, its tires screaming against the pavement as they tried to correct. Mark didn't stop. He accelerated, taking the narrow road at high speed. He didn't need to fight them here. He just needed to outmaneuver them. And if they were dumb enough to keep chasing him, he'd make sure they regretted it. In the rearview mirror, He saw them recovering, their tires kicking up dust as they tried to follow. Mark exhaled through his nose. "All right," he muttered to himself. "Let's see what you've got." He had no idea who was in that car. Maybe it was some of the biker's friends. Maybe it was someone else entirely. But whoever they were, they'd made a big mistake. Because they thought they were hunting him, when in reality, they were about to become the prey. Mark Wahlberg kept his foot on the gas, his SUV roaring down the narrow back road as the car behind him struggled to keep up. He glanced in the rearview mirror, noting the way their headlights swayed from side to side, their driver fighting to regain full control. Whoever they weren't professionals. They were aggressive, sure, but they weren't trained. That gave Mark the edge. The road ahead curved sharply to the right, disappearing into the shadows of a tree line. Mark adjusted his grip on the wheel, calculating his next move. He could keep running, lose them in the darkness, but that wouldn't give him the answers he wanted. He needed to know who they were and why they were following him. His gut told him it had something to do with the bikers from the gas station. Maybe they had friends. Maybe those friends didn't like the way things had ended. Either way, he wasn't about to let them chase him all night. As he neared the curve, Mark slammed the brakes hard, the SUV's tires screeching against the pavement as he executed a flawless, controlled drift. The pursuing car wasn't as smooth. It jerked to the side, the driver clearly not expecting the maneuver. Their tires hit loose gravel on the edge of the road, causing the vehicle to fishtail violently. Mark took advantage of the momentary loss of control. He yanked the wheel to the left, cutting into a small dirt path hidden between the trees. His SUV kicked up dust and debris as he veered off-road, disappearing into the darkness for a few critical seconds. The other car sped past the curve, their driver realizing too late that they had lost him. Mark killed his headlights and rolled forward silently, pressing his back into the seat as he watched the road from between the trees. The other car skidded to a stop, their brake lights glowing red against the black asphalt. Then they sat there, waiting. Mark narrowed his eyes. If they were smart, they'd turn around and leave. But something told him they wouldn't. Sure enough, after a few seconds, the driver's side door opened. A figure stepped out. Mark couldn't see their face, but he could tell by the way they moved that they were tense, on edge. Whoever they weren't expecting this to be easy. They reached into their jacket, pulling out something small. A gun. Mark exhaled slowly. All right. Now he had confirmation. He could leave, let them search the road, waste their time, and disappear into the night. But something in his gut told him he needed to finish this now. They had come after him with a weapon. That meant they weren't here to scare him. They were here for something else, and Mark wasn't the type to leave loose ends. Keeping his breath steady, he reached under his seat and pulled out a steel flashlight. Heavy, solid, the kind that could do some real damage if necessary. He didn't carry a gun. He didn't need to. If it came to a fight, he could handle himself just fine. The figure in the road gestured toward the car, and another person stepped out. 2 of them. That meant at least one more still in the vehicle. Mark watched as they started moving toward the trees, their heads on swivels, scanning the darkness. They were looking for him. Mark adjusted his grip on the flashlight and stepped out of the SUV silently, keeping low as he moved through the brush. His heartbeat was steady, controlled. He had done this before, different circumstances, same strategy. Stay calm, stay quiet, let them make the first mistake. The 2 men crept closer, their boots crunching against the gravel. One of them muttered something under his breath, but Mark couldn't make out the words. What he could make out, however, was the tension in their movements. They were nervous, not professionals, probably just friends of the bikers from earlier, out for revenge. They didn't realize they had already lost. Mark stepped onto the road just as they passed him. The first guy barely had time to react before Mark swung the flashlight hard into his ribs. The man let out a choked grunt, doubling over as pain shot through his body. The second guy turned, bringing his gun up, but Mark was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until the gun clattered to the pavement. Before he could react, Mark drove his knee into his stomach, sending him staggering backward. The first guy recovered enough to lunge, but Mark anticipated it. He sidestepped, grabbing the back of the man's head and slamming him into the side of their own car. The impact sent him collapsing to the ground. The driver, the third guy still in the car, realized what was happening and panicked. He threw the vehicle into reverse, tires screeching as he tried to flee. Mark wasn't going to let that happen. He sprinted forward and, with perfect precision, swung the flashlight straight into the side window. The glass shattered, sending shards flying as the driver let out a startled yelp. The car veered wildly, the driver struggling to regain control. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it was over. The driver bailed out of the car, stumbling onto the road, his hands raised in surrender. The other two groaned on the pavement, barely conscious. Mark Wahlberg stood over them, his breathing steady, his grip still firm on the flashlight. He looked down at the man on his knees, shaken with fear. "Who sent you?" Mark asked, his voice cold. The driver hesitated. Mark took a step forward. "I asked you a question." The man swallowed hard. "The bikers," he stammered. "The guys from earlier. They called us. Said some Hollywood guy humiliated them and they wanted payback. We didn't know it was you." Mark stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "Well," he said, "now you do?" He looked at the two men on the ground, shaking his head. "Tell your friends next time they want revenge," he said. "They should pick someone else." The driver nodded frantically. Yeah, got it." Mark exhaled and took a step back. "Then get out of here." The driver didn't hesitate. He scrambled to his feet, dragging the barely conscious men toward the car. The moment they were inside, he floored it, tires screeching as they sped off into the night. Mark watched them go, waiting until the sound of their engine faded completely before turning back toward his SUV. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. So that's what this was? Petty revenge. He climbed back into his car and started the engine. He should have been angry, maybe even frustrated. But instead, all he felt was exhaustion. He had handled it. That was enough. He pulled back onto the road, the night stretching out ahead of him once again. The gas station incident had ended hours ago, but for some people, it wasn't over. Mark Wahlberg just made sure they understood that if they ever came looking for a fight again, they wouldn't like what they found. Mark Wahlberg drove in silence, the low hum of his SUV the only sound filling the night air. The road stretched ahead of him, empty and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just left behind. The adrenaline from the fight was fading now, replaced by the familiar weight of exhaustion. He had handled it, again. But that wasn't what bothered him. What lingered in his mind was the way it had all unfolded. The way violence, once set in motion, had a way of spiraling. First the gas station, then the chase, then the ambush. It was never just one incident. It was a chain reaction. And he had been caught in it. He glanced at the dashboard clock. It was past 1 in the morning now. He should be home, not out here dealing with low-life thugs who thought they could intimidate the wrong guy. His grip on the wheel tightened slightly before he exhaled, letting it go. What was done was done. He wasn't the type to dwell on things he couldn't change. He had ended it. They wouldn't come after him again. They had learned their lesson the hard way. Up ahead, the dim glow of another gas station appeared in the distance, smaller than the last one. He debated driving past it, but a glance at his fuel gauge told him he didn't have much choice. With a quiet sigh, he flipped on his blinker and pulled in. The station was mostly deserted, save for a single clerk visible through the window and an older man refueling his truck a few pumps away. Mark shut off the engine, stepping out and stretching his shoulders before grabbing the pump handle. The crisp night air cooled his skin as he filled the tank, his mind drifting as he stared at the numbers climbing on the pump screen. It should have been an uneventful stop. Just gas, no drama, no fights, just silence. Then he saw the headlights. A car pulled in fast, tires screeching slightly as it came to a sharp stop near the entrance. The doors flew open, and Mark immediately recognized the 3 men who had ambushed him earlier. His expression remained unreadable, but inside, something coiled tightly in his chest. He had told them to walk away. He had let them go, and they had come back. The driver, the same one who had pleaded for mercy on the side of the road, now held a steel pipe in his hand. His face was twisted with rage, but Mark could see the hesitation beneath it. He didn't want to be here. He was doing this out of fear of losing face, fear of going back to his friends empty-handed. Mark slowly placed the gas pump back in its holder and turned to face them. His voice was calm, even. "You really want to do this?" The man gripping the pipe stepped forward, but his grip wasn't steady. His voice, however, was loud. He was trying to convince himself as much as he was trying to intimidate Mark. "You think you can just embarrass us and walk away?" Mark tilted his head slightly, his tone unfazed. "I let you walk away. You should have taken it." The second man, the one who had nearly had his ribs broken earlier, stepped forward, his lips still swollen from their last encounter. "We're not scared of you," he spat. Mark sighed. "Then you're dumber than I thought." The third guy, the quietest of the group, lingered near the car, shifting uneasily. He wasn't sure about this. Mark could see it in the way his weight shifted from foot to foot. The old man, refueling his truck, looked up, noticing the tension, and quickly finished pumping gas, climbing into his truck and pulling away without a word. The gas station clerk behind the glass saw what was happening too. He didn't move, but Mark could tell he was already debating whether to call the cops. Mark took a slow step forward. The men flinched, despite trying to act tough. "You got one more chance," Mark said quietly. "Leave. Now." The leader's jaw clenched. He gripped the pipe tighter, but he hesitated. Mark could see it all happening before it did. The indecision, the doubt, the realization that this wasn't going to end the way they thought it would. And then the breaking point. The man with the pipe lunged. Mark didn't even wait. He sidestepped the swing effortlessly, catching the man's wrist mid-motion and twisting it hard. The pipe clattered to the ground as the man let out a sharp yell, his knees buckling as pain shot up his arm. The second guy charged. Mark was ready. He drove his fist into the man's gut, then spun and swept his legs out from under him. He crashed onto the pavement with a grunt, gasping for breath. The third guy, the one who had hesitated, froze. Mark turned to him, his voice low, serious. You want to be next?" The man's eyes darted between his two friends on the ground. Then, without a word, he turned and ran back to the car. Mark exhaled through his nose, rolling his shoulders as he looked down at the two men writhing in pain at his feet. "I told you to walk away," he muttered. The car engine roared to life, and the third guy sped off, leaving them behind. The leader, still clutching his twisted wrist, glared up at Mark. "You think this is over?" he hissed. Mark crouched down beside him, his voice quiet but firm. "Yeah," he said, "I do." He let the words sink in, let the reality settle into the man's brain. This wasn't a movie. There was no dramatic comeback. There was no winning this fight for them. "You get one life," Mark continued, "and you're wasting yours being an idiot." The man's expression flickered, but he said nothing. Mark stood up and took a step back. "Now, get out of here." The second guy slowly pulled himself up, still winded. He grabbed his friend by the arm, helping him up as they stumbled toward the darkness, humiliated, beaten, and without a single ounce of the bravado they had walked in with. Mark watched them disappear before turning back to his SUV. He finished refueling, climbed in, and started the engine. As he pulled out of the gas station, his gaze flicked to the rearview mirror one last time. No more chasing, no more ambushes. It was finally over, and this time they wouldn't be back. The road stretched ahead, empty and silent except for the low rumble of Mark Wahlberg's SUV rolling steadily over the asphalt. The tension from the night had finally begun to settle, the weight of the past few hours pressing against his shoulders. He had dealt with worse. He had seen worse. But there was something about tonight that lingered in his mind, a reminder of how easily things could have gone wrong. He had given them a chance to walk away. He had let them go more than once. And yet they had come back, as if they truly believed they had something to prove. The cool air drifted in through the cracked window, carrying with it the distant scent of rain. The night felt calmer now, quieter, as if the chaos had finally burned itself out. He glanced at the dashboard clock, nearly 2 a.m. He should have been home hours ago, but life had a way of throwing unexpected fights in his path. The important thing was that it was over. For good this time. He reached for his phone, checking for any missed calls or messages. Nothing urgent, just the usual. He hesitated for a moment, then opened his contacts and scrolled down until he found a number. Ava. He wasn't sure why, but something about her had stuck with him. Maybe it was the way she had handled herself at the gas station. Maybe it was the way she had been ready to fight back despite the odds. Or maybe it was just the fact that she had been alone, caught in a situation she never should have had to face. Either way, he found himself typing out a quick message. "You good? Made it home safe?" He stared at the screen for a second before hitting send. A few moments passed before the read receipt appeared. Then 3 dots. "Yeah, got home a while ago. Thanks again." Mark smirked slightly before replying. "Told you you'd be fine." Another pause, then her response. "Still doesn't mean I'm not grateful. You didn't have to step in, but you did." Mark exhaled, shaking his head to himself. "Yeah, I did." She didn't reply right away, and he didn't expect her to. There wasn't much else to say. He had done what he always did. He had stepped in because no one else had, because it was the right thing to do, because in a world where too many people looked the other way, he never wanted to be one of them. As he neared the outskirts of the city, the glow of distant streetlights began to break through the darkness. Civilization, familiar streets, almost home. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the stiffness set in from the fights earlier. He'd probably feel it more in the morning, but that was fine. A little pain was nothing compared to the alternative. His phone buzzed again. "If you ever need a favor, let me know. Least I can do." Mark chuckled under his breath. He doubted he'd ever call in a favor, but he appreciated the sentiment. "I'll keep that in mind." The message was read instantly, but no reply came. That was fine. He hadn't expected one. He turned onto his street, finally easing the SUV into his driveway. The house was dark, quiet. He shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle over him. Then, with a deep breath, he pushed the door open and stepped out. The cool air felt different now, no longer charged with tension or adrenaline, just still, peaceful. As he unlocked the front door and stepped inside, he paused for a moment, staring at his reflection in the hallway mirror. There was a faint bruise forming near his jaw, a reminder of the fight. Nothing serious, just another mark from another night that could have gone 100 different ways. He shook his head and moved further inside, tossing his keys onto the counter and heading for the kitchen. A drink sounded good right about now. Something to take the edge off before he finally let himself crash. His phone buzzed one last time as he poured himself a glass. "You really were kind of a hero tonight, just saying." Mark stared at the message for a moment before smirking to himself. He took a sip of his drink, letting the warmth settle in his chest. Hero? Maybe, maybe not. He wasn't looking for a title. He never was. He just did what needed to be done. But still, it was nice to hear. He set his phone down, exhaled slowly, and let the night finally fade away. Justice was served, but what would you have done in that moment? Would you step in or walk away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story inspired you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. More incredible stories are on the way. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from.